This is the third part of the Manipura chakra workshop. Working with anger. Today we have the 22nd of September, 2000 of the 13th year, and we are Vadim Zapokarsav and Mikhail Kolesnik. Let's start with the questions, if there are any. Especially there, if someone is in touch. Part-time students, come on, you are active. We ask questions, I answer them. Someone, sit down at the computers, guys. Yes, please. You said that for yama, for the practice of pranayama, working with Manipura is very useful, to direct navel energy to this center. But for working, actually with Manipura, what is like working with what, in general, what practices are prerequisites to? Well, that is hut. That is, in fact, friends, there are a lot of approaches. This is hatha, this is meditation. This is a work with the contemplation of yantra. Here there's yantra yoga, when you are there, let's say, contemplating the yanka with unblinking eyes. That is, work with vision. This is also working with emotions, with certain emotions. These are meditations of working with emotions. There are special exercises, such as breathing exercises, when you are there, say. Inhaling and exhaling and meditating certain processes in the field of Manipura, and thereby, well, activate everything there. All phenomena. That is, as if it is possible to approach from different sides, and there are quite a lot of different types of yoga, which, well, roughly speaking, lead us to this. Here. Actually, well, big. There is a mantra yoga, that is, when well-known mantras are optimized. That's the way it is. So, you can come to my place on Friday at 6 o'clock and do yoga in the valley, and we try it there. But we agreed that the lesson ends here somehow. So, where are we going to move to? To another place. Yes, on the drag and most likely. Are there any questions?
Alexander's questions. Can I tell you more about the stop?
In more detail. In what sense, in more detail? Random classes. So, come on, no, it's actually a little bit we're going to the side. We go to the side. Well, what is Astromantrabad? Yes, let's do it later. This is a serious topic, not so simple. And if so, please. But irritation, irritability, are these parts of anger, or is it completely different? Well, in fact, yes. Well, as a matter of fact. Well, as if when we get a reaction from outside the world that begins to infringe on us in some way. In fact, it all comes down to the infringement of our freedom. Then we react very badly to it. We get annoyed at it. Well, the extreme degree of irritation is such anger when everything is already carrying us. Incrementally. Our reaction is kind of as if to manifest itself externally. In other words, we can say that irritation is the first signs. Absolutely correct. There is no manifestation. Absolutely correct, yes. That is irritation. You see, working with emotions. There are also some such gradations. That is, it will melt there, let's say, and so on and so forth. And really, well, irritation is a bad factor, because irritation accumulates. In other words, it has such a cumulative effect. You know, you were taken to the subway, pushed once. After the 20th time, you're all out of control. And I, by the way, have another one yet. So we touched on the topic of sexuality and the topic of losing the component that goes on to continue. For the continuation of life with such a common occupation of sex. The same process is going on there. In fact, the launch of the orgasm process, both in men and women, it to some extent goes under the buzz, under the template of anger. That is, we receive nervous impulses, which, on the one hand, seem to give us a feeling of pleasure, but in fact, sexual stimuli are pain hidden under the shell of pleasure. In fact, these impulses are painful, which we do not perceive as painful. They accumulate until some critical moment. And only after that the moment of orgasm turns on. This is a very important factor. And, well, roughly speaking, on the management of sexual energy, here I say again. I touched on these yogs who advise how to use sex correctly in everyday life. There it is believed that if you control anger, then you easily control sexual energy. Conversely, if you control sexual energy, you control anger. Therefore, there are prescribed well-known, so-called sexual practices, having sex without loss. And the longer you stay in this practice, the more you have this inner ability to control anger and, as a rule, gain that potential. But in a milder way. Because when you are annoyed, and you are boiling inside, but you do not let it break out. This is harder to do sometimes than through some sexual practices, as if a workaround maneuver. Here? Yes, please. Tell me, is it possible to call one through the other? What exactly? Anger through sexuality or sexuality? Well, look, here is such a bunch. Well, it's probably some kind of evolutionary. To be honest, I haven't really thought about it, analyzed this moment, but it's probably some kind of evolutionary thing. That a man can manifest anger and sexuality, but a woman practically does not. I mean, well, sort of. Therefore, accordingly, there, let's say, some things you know in terms of anger can sexually turn men on. But they are unlikely to grab women. Do you understand? Here. But this is a separate topic. I don't want to touch it now. If you have an interest in this topic, it is quite a closed topic. Everything that is really connected with sexuality and spirituality, as you understand, is such a piquant topic in itself, right? In other words, we are not quite ready for it yet, even in the West. And on the other hand, it was quite closed, because it gave quite powerful results and opportunities. Now only in the last, maybe decades, some practices have been given more or less openly. Some treatises that had not been known for a long time before, well, actually. Here I refer you to such yogas as the yoga of falling in love, Tantra yoga. There is such a yoga of sexual union. But they all rest on the so-called generic yoga. This is the basis. If you want to deal with sexual yogas, first of all, you need to study generic yoga. That's when everything will become clear. My 4.
If. Now wait a minute. When you already begin to understand that everything has been destroyed by your anger, and you can't change the situation, but you want to, there will be an opportunity to fix it.
When you didn't ruin everything for you. Well, of course, friends. No, you know, yeah, that's what. What is the good of this world? What is the bad? The good thing is that everything you see, you have done yourself. Well, what's wrong with that, right? That is, you can do everything accordingly. Judging. Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, the flip side. You can make everything better over time, fix it. Well, and in any case, do not repeat the old mistakes. Here. So, anything else?
Control. Do you need to work out your anger?
In addition to controlling your anger, you need to work out. In what sense to work out? Besides control? Well, apparently, in addition to controlling it, there is something else to work with it. Splash out. Is it proactive or something else preventive? Well, you know, I remember back in the Soviet years, I read some magazine, and we have everything there. I remember in the Soviet years, everyone admired Japan. There, and what kind of Japan? What kind of Japan? And that's what they say they released in Japan, such as this. A toy, like in the form of a human boss. And a baseball bat to go with it? Yes. To beat me up means to take my soul away. The fact that I'm kind of like this. I took my soul away and kind of let you go. On the one hand, it sometimes helps. Why do people break dishes there, right? Why is there furniture being broken there? There's a sort of showdown between husband and wife in the kitchen, and everything is there and so on. Why? That's the sublimation. So the skulls would break each other, and so everyone just beats the dishes. That is, there is a kind of sublimation. But what is the danger of this situation in general, when you have such a working out effect like this? You know, it's like playing computer games. You play and you wet everyone there. Bradilki shooting games. And then, when you have a real machine gun in your hands, it doesn't turn on in your head that it's already real for you. And the behavior algorithm, this very starter that starts, yes, is the same. And this is a very big danger, in fact, that here is any scenario that we have played out in our thoughts, in meditations, in watching a movie, or there in a computer toy. It is at a moment of uncertainty, when a life situation suddenly puts you in front of a similar one. Before a similar situation, but you won't know what to do. As a rule, any experience you've ever had related to, it will pop up. Therefore, it is considered, in fact, such as yoga in the morning in a fire, it is said flared. In other words, it is a negative imprint that prescribes your stereotype of further behavior. Well, in particular, yes. Let's say there is a criminal subculture, whether you want it or not, it encourages crime. Or are you listening to Blatniak? Even by the fact that you listen to him, criminal Shinsen, you support the criminal subculture. And you contribute to the growth of criminality. Do you understand? Here. And we don't understand it at all. Yes, in our country, on the contrary, everyone there boasts that they have a roof there, where it is necessary, and where it is not necessary. And in America, try at least one businessman said that he has connections with the criminal world. But everyone will start to shy away from him. Just shy away. Who wants problems, understand? Here. So it's like, you know, this kind of work, in general, with karmic patterns of behavior. Here with a karmic pattern of behavior. When you, after all, murder on domestic grounds. The husband killed his wife out of jealousy. Why did he kill her? Well, because in that environment there are such morals. That is, the wife cheated, kill. Well, that's it. Here is the program laid down. Firm where it is not critical. That's the public opinion, so that's it. And oddly enough, it has a very strong effect. I'm telling you. Here, let's say, in our country. I turn on the TV. I understand that our country was given to the plundering of someone else's army. In other words, there is just a concrete collapse of moral and ethical conditions. Because if you're going to watch Crime Chronicles from morning to night, I'm unwittingly in this area. You will begin to tolerate those things where you should have been intolerant. Come tonight, turn on the TV. What will you hear? So many died, so many drowned, so many burned, so many were stabbed, so many were shot. You see everything, all the news. There's no, what's there? Science news, culture news, art news. Nah, you'll hear it. Here. So, you know, like Manipura chakra, it's responsible for digesting food, right? But, strictly speaking, in the broad sense of the word, in yoga everything goes like food. Any information is, roughly speaking, food for your subtle structures. And what you will feed her, then you will get. Do you understand? Well, you feed all the bad food, but then there's nothing to complain about that with health problems. You communicate with bad people, you communicate in the wrong direction, and then you get your fate like this. You know, this is what I say. I always constantly emphasize that it is. This is especially important in business. Communicating with successful people makes you successful. Communicating with people who, in fact, do nothing but do nothing, sooner or later demoralize you. And you yourself begin to be like that. Because with whom you will lead, you will gain from that. For that fate you will inherit. So with respect to anger management patterns, it's better to come up with your own algorithm, right? And play it back inside yourself, play it back and play it back. So that later, in an incomprehensible situation, it was he who worked and no other. Well, in particular, at one of the seminars, this is my methodology too. Let's play someone now to know a little. Come on, someone, yes, a guinea pig. That means it's even better to get up, even better. This means that he is one and has been subjected to anger. And now you're going to use your fists. Come on, here's even the most typical situation, you know, it's on the household cue. You prayed before going to bed, Desdemona, remember, right? Here. And now you're going to use everything in the world. So, from a karmic point of view, it's best for you to faint now. This is actually a protective reaction of the body. But the fact is that when you are subject to anger, you are not inclined to fall. Therefore, there is such a meditation. Who was at the seminar? Who will remember her? Come on, let's go. Well, roughly, yes, when we fall. And at first we merged there, we wanted to live with the light, and then we plummet, switch off, and talk to ourselves or out loud. Either out loud or to myself. Even out loud is more effective. My legs are relaxed, my arms are relaxed, my torso is relaxed, my face and head are relaxed. My breathing is calm, I don't have any problems. Why? Yes, because I died. Here it is so uncomplicated. And an intricate exercise. I know one person who, in fact, one day was like this in the middle of the street, and the weather was cold, wet, and dirty. He understood that he was already everything, and he smacked into the moon. Cold, wet, dirty. And he prays there for 15 minutes. But then I got up with a feeling of strength, calmness, turned around and left. Nothing that gets wet will dry out. Nothing that dirty clean up, right? But he did not make karmic ones. Well, an impulse that will definitely return in this life, or the next one will return. Friends, that's what's scary. You understand that the moment of anger, it turns off fear. But it also turns off the brain. Actually, why does he turn off the tractor as well? The brain turns off, right? And we are no longer aware of the consequences. One more time. It also works, oddly enough. Here is the sexual mechanism, the test of orgasm. Here we are at the previous seminar. You remember, yes, we are with you. We have considered the question that the summary of the Kisthana chakra is actually the program of your next life. That is, if a man wants a woman, then, of course, he will be in bed with her. Then, of course, he will start having sex with her. Here. And therefore, he will certainly experience an orgasm, fertilize a woman, or at least start some kind of relationship with her. Create a family, leave offspring, and in the next life will be forced to be born among his descendants. That is, today, with our relationship with a man and a woman, we program our next life. Because in the next life, we will not have free bodies. I don't understand why even in the East, and in the West, they don't talk about it. Here you have a karmic predisposition, will be born only there, with whom you have a karmic connection. No one else. More precisely, out of grace, you can be born the 12th offspring in a large Chinese family. Do you understand? Or some big African family. Why? Because they have all given birth to their own. They've already given birth to everyone. And we need at least one potential human soul, otherwise animal souls will be born. And that's when, yes, you have a priority right. Well, in well-fed, rich Europe, there is not enough for their bodies. Today I heard about Germany. They have a sharp decline in the population. Therefore, a certain amount. Their population will soon decrease by 10 million in a few years. They're dying. Quietly, calmly. Here. Therefore, the grappling chakra determines, in fact, your next life. But it defines through sexuality. Sexuality is determined through your having sex. And whether or not you fertilize, it means that you are the object of your lust. Well, if you are, let's say, a future man, right? And to fertilize or not to fertilize comes down to whether you control your sexual urge here, which leads to the ejaculation of the line. If you control, you still have a lot of chances and a lot of maneuvers. And if not, do you know how many friends I have? I remember after school there. And got married there on girlfriends, right? Why? The very first sex led to pregnancy, led to marriage, then it turned out that they couldn't stand each other. Well, because, well, yes, that's it. And why did this happen? Because this one here, both having sex and the accumulation of external irritation inside accumulates, then leads to an uncontrolled reaction of the body. In this regard, you know, even in some tantras, it is said that it is possible to put equality aside between the emergence of anger and the breakthrough of anger, between having sex, which means experiencing an orgasm, and between sneezing. That is, try this very nose, tickle a little and try to restrain yourself, not to sneeze. Oh, how hard it will be. Because this is a kind of reaction of the body. Accumulated above a certain level, bang. The dam burst. Then the dam was sealed up, and it fills up again. Yes, in other words, this is about the same process going on. Here. Therefore, in fact, in this regard. And from the opposite. That is, if you control sexuality from the outside, you can work with anger, and if with anger, then with sexuality. Are there any other questions there? And here is the work with anger, but since it is parallel to sexual practices they require. Do they impose the third principle of yoga? No, in general, everything that concerns. Well, let's do it this way. Everything about sexuality is aerobatics. These are the most closed teachings in yoga. Now you can drive the internet there under the word tantra, and there will be obscenity. There are some strange people doing something there, they call it tantra. This has nothing to do with true tantra. All the true bundle of sexuality and spirituality, first of all, are extremely classified teachings so far. Secondly, extremely difficult to implement. Thirdly, it takes a lot of things to get you there at all, even for a couple of people. Not to mention that you yourself have received at least some benefit. And there the third principle is absolutely necessary, since this is a fast method. In anger. Here. In anger, it's easier, friends. In anger, why is it simpler? Because after all, you know, well, here are the factors in sex. There are much more of them unnoticeable to you than in anger. Because, in the end, you know, in anger you can only be angry at what you have a connection with. Because you understand. You can't be angry at something you don't understand, right? That is here. Well, I'm not going to go to the side now. I can give a lot of examples. I'm just talking about another one. There is. Here you are now doing meditation. Before the break, will give all living beings happiness. What were you doing? You did the following meditation when you concentrated on the heart center and wished happiness first to all those you love, then to all those who are indifferent to you, then to all those who are your enemy. Well, that is, potentially you should hate them at all and feel anger towards K. Remember, I always have this phrase here. The film was such a nice Mimino, still Soviet. And there was a court there, and the judge asks if this one has experienced it then. Who's that one there? Dislike of victims. And you know, he felt such dislike, and he told me so. I can't. What a dislike. Here. It could be that you have some characters in your life, and as soon as you think about them, you can't squeak, you know, right? That's the dislike you feel. Here. And anger. Here. But it doesn't matter. You are in all three categories, and those you love, and those who are indifferent to you, and those from whom you cannot escape. So you want happiness. And thus, inside, these are tenacious. The tenacious grip to respond blow to blow is slightly weakened. As a result, when you encounter a life situation, you have a few milliseconds to think there. But in these few milliseconds, you can pull yourself together, remember all the principles of yoga there, and so on, and so on. And either to crash like that means to say that I have no problem, that I died, right. Either turn around and leave, or do something else, but in any case, it will no longer be a surprise attack. Here. But another question arises. And why do we start this meditation from here, from the heart center? Why should he start with throats or with brains? Yes, here is the third one with this very point between the eyebrows, and from here, we wish everyone. So we also want to spread out our thoughts. Again, the explanation is very simple and logical. Well, it's not easy, but it's logical. Manipura chakra is sandwiched between two other principles. Between the principle of water, responsible for sexuality, and the principle of air, the heart chakra. And in this hierarchy, the higher center always controls the lower one. And so when you work with the heart chakra, think that all living beings are happy. You automatically pull your consciousness out of the navel center and move it higher. And you are already from the height of this chakra. You have more power over it. That is why it is called for all students of the International Open Yoga University. So, how many do we have? We have 208 weeks of training. And how many days? It is necessary to multiply by 7. Here. 208 times multiplied by 7 times during the training. That is, practice every day. 1,416. Yes. Here. Here are 1,416 days of training in the open. How much?
Not 16.
Well, it doesn't matter. A lot. A lot, right. Meditate. May all living beings be happy. So, imagining how a wave of light from happiness to relatives and friends, strangers, enemies. In particular, it concerns relatives and friends. Friends, unfortunately, you know, here are many Eastern teachings. They are very pessimistic. They say that the world is full of suffering, the world is full of change. This is who you love today. Tomorrow you will hate. Those who were considered friends today will turn out to be bitter enemies tomorrow. You understand, right? And we must be ready for this. This meditation just prepares you for any turn. To any turn. Anyway, one more time. Our brain works continuously. Our consciousness jumps from one thought to another, you know, constantly going over. And if we have at least a fraction of a few there, I don't know, miles, micro, I don't know how many seconds of pause there are. The probability that we will do something stupid is less. And this meditation here, it's definitely there, or it's practice, it's definitely there, it won't give you, you know, 100% guarantee that you won't be carried. But the probability decreases. In other words, there are some things where it is necessary to work even in this way. Any questions? Yes, good.
Sometimes there are, well, these here, aggression is a positional thing. The same ones.
Well, look, what is a crisis? Come on. Yes, so there is a difference between aggression and anger. Purposeful anger. Prerequisites for them. No, let's do it in a good way. When anger breaks out, it's called aggression. Because aggression, Hitler hid in a cave, walled up the entrance, and indulged in aggression against the USSR, right? But no one found out about it. No. He first conceived something, and then really moved the troops. You understand, right? Aggression implies action. That is, it's like aggression is when, well, there is already something, there already is. And in this respect, as well as the heaviest seeds of karma, as negative, well, negative. Well, in general, any karma is strongest when three factors come together. This is, when you, roughly speaking, if so in your own words, when you thought, when you expressed your will, and when you did. Sometimes, all kinds of stupid thoughts come. How? Well, the most idiotic thoughts are there. You have someone there. It's someone to kill. This is Mark Twain. I forgot the expression that, like, if everyone was sent to hell for thinking of killing someone, then it would be overflowing. Well, something like that, right? Here. So what? But if you had experienced a wool at the same time, it is already stronger. This is already a thought, just a thought. Abstract thought, without a price in emotional thought. Emotion has already colored. But also still nothing. But if you have done something else at the same time, then these three factors really lead to the fact that you have received negative karma. Because you can sometimes move someone and even kill them by accident. But this karma is not so strong. As in the criminal code, there is murder by negligence. There is some kind of murder there in a state of passion. And the most difficult articles are, planned murder. Yes, and even harder is banditry. When you killed someone with your companions. That is, in general, there are the most terrible punishments. Why? Because, well, it's like a reflection, yes, of the degree of harm. But you see what's the matter. There is a kind of cosmic criminal code. Actually, even if you were not caught in a particular state, it does not mean that nothing. I don't know, well, that nothing will happen. That is, everything will come back. That's right. That's how the world is made, friends. And here's the question, what do you get for thinking to someone? What do you get for having a very emotional thought of killing someone? And what you get for killing someone, but you didn't think about it. And, well, or what you get as a cold-blooded hired killer who decided to kill, well, killed. But, generally speaking, he didn't want to kill anyone, he has such a job. You understand, right? In other words, these gradations, they lead to the response of the universe in different ways. And the worst thing is when all three converge. That's 100% negative karma. So, and here as a rule, what we are talking about, aggression is as a rule, when all three converge. We know the object of aggression. We are willing to show aggression. We show it. Actually, we are making an impulse.
Well, even in such cases, you can trace this cause and effect relationship, right? But sometimes we know that anyone can happen. Well, as it were. I do not know how to say it correctly. Here there is anger, which can be traced, well, as if by a logical chain. Yes, there is, well, an associative goal to reach him. There is anger. Well, somehow even here, you can't even split it. You don't understand how it can be divided.
Divide.
What is it? You don't understand where he came from.
Oh, so there's no causeless one. Yes. Yes.
What melts?
Again, there is such a thing that women have this same, like PMS, associated with menstruation. Well, this, friends, this is life, right?
It is connected with this.
Yes. Look here. This is a very serious factor. But since, I say again, our civilization is still, well, somehow, very sanctimonious about all manifestations of sexuality. Everyone is somehow silent about it, or somehow laugh, or somehow do not consider it necessary. But this is a very serious factor in women's lives. Well, imagine a great woman. Everything is wonderful. Everything is wonderful. A loving husband. Everything is in the most magnificent way, but with a certain periodicity. She experiences causeless hatred, anger of destruction, displeasure, or something else in relation to the sciences. In general, he loves. Here. And papers. Here. And as a matter of fact, and well, as if this is also, in fact, a very serious topic. The bundle is here. The combination of these conditions with the way of life there, and so on. Well, what is it, Tanya? Here. And there I am. Here. So, the question is the same again. You see, the sexual centers are involved. Well, because what is monthly? Let's outline it. Nature has laid down the structure of the human body like this, that life should continue. Nature is afraid that a woman will live her life and leave no offspring. Accordingly, in the next life, if she does not leave offspring, there will be no human body for her to be born. And, accordingly, she will be forced to be born with a decrease, and this will lead to a huge amount of suffering, pain, and so on. Still, you must agree, life in the body of a dog is much more unpleasant than life in a human body. Here, with all the other temples. So, and look what kind of thing turns out. Nature laid, a month has passed, and you, my friend, are not fertilized. What are you doing anyway? Do you have a husband like that? There is. And what is it that he is? None. Or maybe he didn't give it at all. He really needs to change before it's too late. Otherwise you won't give birth to anyone at all. And this mechanism, it is really connected with trying the strength of a man. And what is the strength of a man? The strength of a man is the strength of his consciousness. That is, if, after the manifestation of her anger, he goes into consciousness and does not respond blow for blow, that is, he will not respond to her aggression with reverse aggression, then no. That's it, the man is strong, the man is normal. Here. And if a man, then it means that he is not very good. And this led to a relationship, well, so much the better. He remained weak. Does it make sense to have offspring from a man on whom you press a little, so he flowed? But no, it's not some bad guy. And, well, I am, of course, very primitively trying to explain the actions of PMS. Because, after all, why doesn't nature do the same thing painlessly, so that a woman doesn't even notice? You can write. And therefore, the so-called levels of the causal body are affected here. They are very deep, which, in turn, can launch any, as you say, mechanisms. By the way, PMS of optional fire sometimes has depression, irritation. Well, in this. Yes. Well, it's not even irritation, but some other. That is, strictly speaking, it is. This factor is simple. But on the other hand, warned means armed, if a woman knows perfectly well. Yes, by the way, pay attention, in all cultures, with the exception of some of these areas of philosophy in yoga, women were considered to have impure blood. She was not allowed to go to church, or to worship, or even there. One friend from Tatarstan, she said that they don't even let her into the cemetery. And it will be calculated that, well, I honestly don't understand the logic, right? In the cemetery too, in my opinion, everything is already over. Oh yeah. Yes, that is, but nevertheless, why is it so historically, yes, that everyone is such obscurantists? No, it's just an experienced fact that really, a woman these days, in these situations, becomes a little inadequate. Because she's testing the strength of the environment. Here. Let's friends. Is there a connection there? Be quiet. Silently. Yes, please. Well, besides the fact that Manipura is responsible for anger, it is also responsible for our charisma, for our actions in this world, our powers of action. In this, in other words, it is through Manipura that we can, as it were, shape the world the way we need it. Well, for example, to do business, right? This is the Manipur part. But in order to have tumorism, we need to be able to control Manipur. Well, you know, I also had one friend. I'm a physicist by my first education, and such a good physicist, academic, yes. It was then that I only butt-butted in yoga. In terms of the fact that my background is quite rich. And now I remember when science all crashed in the early 90s, and here I am, and all my friends, well, how did someone end up where? Someone turned out to be in America. Someone went into business like me, someone else reviled someone. And that's when you get from a fairly intelligent environment somewhere out there, you know, here, well, at the level of some kind of Churkheisen, you know, right? Or somewhere where there are, well, enough such people are simple, uncomplicated, rude, not burdened with intelligence. In terms of the degree of their ignorance, many surpass us all combined. And so sooner or later, you begin to understand that there is such a stratum of people. They understand in a good way. Here they need to yell. Here, and it is desirable to shout obscenities. Because they don't understand the words, it seems to them, well. That is, in Chinese, you are with them. Here. And there it is. Look at him. Yes, I understand. You're starting something intelligent, but wouldn't you be kind? But dear Jean, it means to do this, that. On the contrary, they perceive your politeness as a weakness. On your attempt to negotiate, they perceive it as an attempt to deceive them, and so on. On the contrary, brute physical strength, backed up by charisma. Oh, she's going well. But to do this, you need to have some such, you know, such combat coloring eggs. That's why, once again I say, all these people here in the early 90s, and even now they still meet from Russian. All of them are mowing down bandits. Why? Because you have shown that you are in business, and everything means to you is the honor of respect. And they want not to mess with you, right? Here. But, friends, in fact, you know, once Ramakrishna had such a saying that you should not bite anyone. But sometimes you need to show your teeth. But it is even more desirable to show them so impressively. And for this, if you really have everything in order with Manipura, then you have both the intonation of your voice and the manner of behavior. It begins to inspire respect and trust. That is, people begin to feel. People are beginning to feel the power. I had a case in my life, well, I have a complicated background there, in the early 90s, too, when there was no money. Nothing left. It was completely by chance that fate brought me together with a mafia boss. He himself was quite an intelligent person, he knew several languages, and so on, and so on. And here, this is his entourage, the Bratva. Oh. I was surprised that there is an audience in the world at all. And, to be honest, I was even a little afraid. But even why? It's so, you know, brutal. So deranged, huh? I think, no, it won't work that way. It is necessary to speak to them in a language that they understand. And what do you think worked? He even bragged about me the other day. They even wanted to hire me. You know who? To knock out debts. That is, an intermediate link. That is, who could intelligently talk to someone and explain before these goons come. It means that everything is already there. To destroy everything. Of course, I was flattered when, you know, when the Soviet Union collapsed, when science collapsed. When there was nothing to eat and so on there, I don't know, right? At least these appreciated, you know, the former physicist, you know. These ones. Yes. Well, there was such sarcasm, of course. That's why, strictly speaking, we are going to do a couple of exercises with you right now. which also indirectly develop the Manipura chakra, but it is from the field of mantra yoga. But how are we going to proceed with this? Who has any questions? Yes, please.
Roman Truca, which was asked. They write again, here.
But somehow. What does it have to do with?
They mentioned that on the petals.
No, there are all the letters on the petals that make up the mantra. Ha! Well, friends, well, don't force all the secrets to go fishing at once. Yes, yes. I don't know. Yes, please. My question is this. If there are people around yoga who do not do yoga themselves, but know that we are yogs meditating there, may all living beings be happy, and begin to abuse our position. How is it better to be with them, after all, to show your teeth? Yes, but in principle, according to the same scheme and act. Like smoke. Well, yes, roughly speaking. Then they start the same for us. You know, friends, I of course, now again have to tell you all these stupid things. Yes, but life, especially in Russia, is complicated. It's complicated, isn't it? But look, yes, that is. Well, it's hard to say, friends, definitely. Because the karmic situation in our country is very difficult. Very. Just disastrous. Just disastrous. That's why here. There's so much mixed up here that you don't even know where to look for ends, because. Well, look, the general universal answer is, you have to be kind. They must. If you practice yoga, you should not harm any living being by all means. By all means. That is, unless absolutely necessary, you should not offend a fly. Except when it is your direct duty to really use your power. Let's say if you went to work for the police and met bad hooligans there who don't understand in a good way, then you have to do your duty. Even if you meditated on the mantra, may all living beings be happy in your police station from morning to night.
Why?
It's your duty. On the other hand, there is a second principle of yoga. Sometimes you can show your teeth. You can show your teeth so that, well, how to say it again, there was no desire to try you for strength. You know, recently military parades have been held on Red Square again on the 9th of May. Do you think that, just like that? Because someone, apparently in the world as I believe, has forgotten that we still have nuclear weapons, right? That it's just that we are the same after all. Here. Well, again, you know, this is the factor with whom you communicate. Factor. Well, look, this is a difficult question, actually. Well, let me dig a little deeper into the theory, because it's important. From a spiritual point of view, it is very beneficial when, at our level of ignorance, when people live in the same country, at different levels of spirituality. Why? Because everyone finds their niche and, roughly speaking, performs their functions. And freedom together is greater than freedom separately. But this requires layers between different groups of people. In India, they did it easier. They made castes. We have no castes, so we have a mishmash. And that's why this complicates things very much. Here, but in any case, if you think carefully and apply the so-called second principle, Yuri, the principle of common sense, or the principle of least action, it is best to anticipate the possibility of manifestation of what you do not want to apply. Here I am constantly from Vedic times. I constantly give examples that two such main deities are known, Varuna and Indra. Both of them, as a matter of fact, fought with Rita. Well, with the manifestation of disharmony, evil, then what? Well, in the future, right? Moreover, Indra really how did such a fire brigade fight directly, so it means that in a direct collision with evil, right? But the crow acted differently. He eliminated evil even at the stage of planning evil. Can you imagine, right? In other words, you do not allow a situation where someone could even think, do something, so that you would have to show anger at it and break his skull. This is, you know, a multipass. And here, let's say, the same India, it has really done a lot about this in this regard. Well, first of all, she led the caste system. Right now, the caste system is. This is the curse of India. But at one time it was salvation. And how will you separate the cattle from the people of culture? Nothing. Therefore, the edges should be very clear, insurmountable. Now this is it. Or, let's say, another situation. Russia and the United States of America have made nuclear, thermonuclear weapons. Because they spent a lot of money on science, and that's where they did it, right? And now this nuclear bomb can be stolen, I beg your pardon, by some monkeys, and blown up somewhere as a terrorist act. In principle, they could not have thought of it themselves, made a bomb, but they were smart enough to throw it. Or another example. Here I have the physics of fast-flowing processes. I am, in fact, a specialist in the physics of Gorenge, explosion, both chemical and there. Not just chemical ones. Here, try to make some of this idiot, scumbag, study chemistry, and make him synthesize some explosive substance. He's going to go crazy, you know, because he is still at the level of a monkey. But on the other hand, he can find a ready-made recipe for how to do it all. And so look, what kind of protection? By filtering knowledge. Not to give knowledge to those who can then use it and bring you a lot of trouble. That is, ahead of work. Here. That is, it would certainly be ideal. So, okay, who else has what? And if it has already suffered? Where to? I realized that I didn't run away. Well, if you have already suffered to submit. And then there is such a moment. Sort of. How comprehensive she is. Someone karmically needs to get money. You're dodging. That is, you just need to hit him so that he understands what is wrong. Well, friends, you know, here again. Let's then decide with you once again, what is karma? Karma is the law of cause and effect. What to sow or something, I will devour. But this is a stupid explanation of the law of karma. The law of karma is more philosophically saturated. Each of you is an absolutely free being, and you live only in the world that you have built yourself. You have one ability, all your wishes come true. And now you live in the world that was shaped by your desires during all your previous ones. That is, you once in previous lives have made a lot of things that, by your action or inaction, have led to your current state. Therefore, if someone comes to you, yes, that is, then in fact, it is a product of your housing, will to live in that universe. So that someone comes and you hit someone on the head. Well, why? Why did you invent such an idiotic universe? In other words, the law of karma boils down, in fact, to the fact that we express this will. Any water expression is directly or indirectly fulfilled. Wouldn't it be better to say so? No, no, stop, 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 stop. I've been thinking up the wrong thing here. I do not know how this man, who came for me to tell him, so this is the very thing, ratted on the melon, as you say, right. I don't want to know him. I don't want to play a role like this. An evil cop. I don't get paid for it. I want to build my personal universe on other rules, so that such mugs did not come to me at all anymore. I mean, I don't want to see them, right? And so the question here is not to get even more involved in what you yourself have expressed more, but to say in time, oh, no, 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 stop, stop. It's not something she came up with. Now we need to come up with the exact opposite side. That's just the mechanism of how. Do you need to enlighten him? No. Why? Because he is a free being. That's when he expresses his will, he will enlighten himself. You don't have to beat him. He'll come up to the wall and beat his head, right? That's when he needs it. Do you need it? This is for you. Another thing is that he asked you. And here we come to another very important point. By the way, I faced this issue very harshly with her. Don't laugh. This is a teacher-student question. In other words, if someone comes to me to learn yoga, he thereby, by default, delegates to me the authority to sometimes pull him down. But just like if a child was born in your family, he delegated to you the authority to raise him, until he himself understands what needs to be done. You understand, right? This is a different conversation. If, well, someone asked you, and you took it upon yourself to beat, then, in a melon, when someone is wrong, right? But he asked for it. And if not, well, why the hell do you need all this? Here. But it is we who have gone to the side of the law of karma. My building. Thank you. That's it, right? Are there no questions or are there more? So, let's sum it up again. Do you have any? I don't have one. That's it? Yes. No, I mean there it is. No, no, no. So, look. Let's summarize. So, the Muladhara chakra is fear. Svadhisthana chakra, lust. So Manipura chakra is anger. Each higher chakra controls the lower one. If some of it is knocked out, then it is easiest to control, well, that is, as if to clamp the enemy in the vice of the upper and lower chakras. In other words, if, let's say, you are experiencing anger, then it is best to squeeze the chakra between, respectively, Svadhisthana and Navata chakra. So, the umbilical one. And everything is already in the grip of everything. It's easier for her to work. Therefore, there are still other methods that, on the one hand, go from the lower chakra above. Well, I mentioned one of them. Sexual practices are possible, in particular, and the other, from top to bottom, is working through the Anahata chakra. So it's me? Well, this will be the topic of our next seed. Anahata chakra is the principle of air. He is responsible for the same channel of information in life as for touch. For the sense of touch. Here. And he has a lot of interesting things there. So, and, well, in fact, our task is to consistently put one chakra after another under control. As long as we put the mind chakra under control. And when we put the mind chakra under control, we will reach the state of samadhi first with an object, then samadhi without an object, and fulfill, well, the highest goal. But we'll talk about it later. So, that's it. Wonderful. They are silent. So, you are not silent. You are tweeting something there, write something, clear, not clear, like, dislike. So, now, friends, look at what other methods of working with the chakras there are. But before we discuss them with you, then we will consider them. Before we look at it with you, let's do it again. And now the chakra is not Rupin. Once again remind us of this piece. I meditate over him in the evening, sitting on a ram of 4 in a circle, glowing, the incoming sun. It is always difficult to live here in your ancient image and three-eyed. It is light and boiled, but from the ashes that it is smeared, it seems white. His hands sell gifts and averts fear. He is the destroyer of creation. Here dwells Shah and Lak, Lakini, a benefactress in a 4-armed, radiant body, a dark, dressed yellow robe, decorated with all kinds of parts of her. Meditation on this loafer, it is achieved with the power to create and destroy. In a bath with asphalt, quite well. Consciousness always dwells in this image. Wonderful. And so let's do some more exercises. Well, unfortunately, we don't have much time left. And the first one is working with the voice in general and working with such utilizations. Well, first of all, let's repeat the same exercise. Works with decoys. Let's start by singing the mantra, M.So, let's go.
Pelo buco O. Pelo Теперь произносим звуки А, О, У, М, последовательно переходящие друг в друга в своем ритме. И при этом обращаем внимание на центральный канал от точки основания нашего тела, до макушки головы его представляем. И стараемся представить, что звук А зарождается внизу, О поднимается, У выше, М в самом верху. Получится. Поехали?
Практик сделаем. Итак, первая практика. Вспоминаем, как выглядит огонь. И медитируем, что у нас в Манипура чакре вспыхивает огонь и начинает яростно гореть. А мы начинаем повторять мантру рам, 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 рам. И продолжаем делать эту практику. Давайте остановимся. После этой практики Михаил даст еще. А я, с вашего позволения, вас покину. Я очень прошу вас, напишите отзывы на этот семинар, что было понятно, что непонятно. Ну и, наконец, приглашаю вас на все другие семинары. Напоминаю, что в цикле этих семинаров следующий будет по Анахата чакре, затем по Вишудха чакре, затем по Аджна чакре, затем по Сахасрара чакре. То есть у нас вот на несколько месяцев вперед эта программа, поэтому я прошу вас, следите, если вам это интересно. Значит, ну и прошу написать отзывы, так как очень важно, как всегда. Теперь приступаем к практике. Итак, представили огонь. Представили вот такого формы. Ага, уже здесь зайцы, уже чего-то это. Вот, представили. Да, это огонь нарисован, да? В пупке горит огонь. И вы повторяете рам, 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 рам. Значит, стараемся произносить достаточно низким голосом, чтобы вот у нас живот вот так вот ром, 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 ром. Да, вот, чтобы вибрировала вот нижняя часть нашего этого самого тела. А вот. Потом еще Михаил даст нам другие упражнения дыхательные. Ну и там будет одно упражнение, когда вы должны будете надуть живот. Значит, сделать полный вдох и надуть его, медитируя на пупочный центр. Но начинаем с рама. Поехали! Рам, 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 рам,
Сейчас сделаем еще упражнение с пранаяма-йоги, парочку. Вот, первое, переменное дыхание, немножко теория, чего все это делается. Если так свести все к минимуму, что мы вообще можем делать в этом мире, то мы можем делать две вещи. Это воспринимать этот мир и действовать в этом мире. Поэтому у нас есть два канала, которые, есть центральный канал, о котором мы уже говорили, на который насаживаем наши чакры. Да, если так можно сказать, конечно. Вот. И есть два второстепенных, так называемых канала, это Инда и Пингала. Один канал восприятия, другой действия. Левый канал восприятия, правый канал действия. Если мы обратим внимание, то наши ноздри переключаются примерно раз в 2 часа, 1,5-2 часа. Мы дышим то одной ноздрёй лучше, то второй. И если мы понаблюдаем за этим, то когда, например, работает левый канал, то нам хочется воспринимать информацию. Мы хотим слушать, мы хотим сидеть, мы лежать хотим, мы телек хотим смотреть. Вот, еще что-нибудь делать, но не действовать. Мы хотим воспринимать. Вот, и когда, например, правая ноздря работает, то нам, наоборот, хочется действовать, нам хочется ходить, нам хочется бегать, нам хочется прыгать, нам хочется говорить и так далее. Вот, и эти два канала должны быть, они как бы тонкие, и они должны быть чистыми, для того, чтобы мы нормально воспринимали и действовали в этом мире. Вот. Мы сейчас будем делать... Вообще, они бывают разными, по-разному практики проходят. С этими тонкими именно ощущениями дыхания. Вроде бы как бы техника одна, но можно дышать вот так. То есть мы делаем вдох, да, и мы как бы думаем, что мы дошли до одной чакры, потом спускаемся ниже, 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 ниже. Вот. Да. То есть можно такую практику делать, когда все чакры уже будут изучены. Вот. И еще было бы здорово при этом, когда доходим до чакры, там хотя бы биджа мантру назвать. Ну, если мы делаем его, да, через правую ногу. Рам. То есть мы как бы почистили эту чакру, грубо говоря, через правую, соответственно, канал действия. То есть у каждой чакры есть также свой канал действия, точнее орган действия, и он орган восприятия. Вот у Манипуры это, конечно же, орган восприятия глаза, а действия расходятся, естественно, там, у людей. Вот, тексты. Но самый такой классический, более-менее, это ноги. Орган действия, это ноги, передвижение. Хотя и бывает и по-другому, там написано, там руки, по-моему, тоже какие-то. Органы выделения, по-моему, тоже. Некоторых трактатах. Но не суть. Вот. Можно так дышать, но мы сейчас так не будем дышать. Мы сейчас в общем почистим. Мы сейчас будем дышать, вдыхая через, например, левую ноздрю, мы опускаемся вниз самый, доходим до низа и поднимаемся вверх по центральному каналу. Потом опять делаем через левую ноздрю, доходим до низа, поднимаемся через центральный канал. Через правую ноздрю. И вот так дышим. При этом стараемся ощущениями прямо пустить этот воздух. Да, то есть стараемся почувствовать то, что мы вдохнули, и ощущение как опускается вниз.
Как мы на вдохе отпускаем, на выдохе поднимаем?
Да. Вот. Ставим точку между бровей. Вот. Закрываем одну ноздрю, делаем вдох через противоположную. Ощущения опустились вниз. Закрываем. Ноздрю открываем противоположную, делаем выдох через нее. Через нее же вдох. Закрываем через противоположный выдох. Через нее же вдох. Через противоположный выдох. И так далее. Тело расслабленное, дыхание свободное, никаких напряжений не должно быть. Наша главная задача это вот почувствовать этот канал, эти каналы и постараться их почистить таким вот, грубо говоря, своим сознанием и ощущениями. Постепенно завершаем. И сделаем следующее упражнение. Всем известное, ну, наверное, все капалабхати. То есть резкие выдохи животом, пассивные вдохи. То есть мы делаем только усилие, когда выдыхаем. Вот. Делаем столько, сколько приятно таких выдохов. А потом делаем задержку на вдохе. Надуваем полный живот воздуха. Тот, кто знает, и тот, кто уже делает, делаем мула-банку, когда надуваем полный живот воздуха. Мула-банка — это сжатие мышц промежности. Тем самым начинаем как бы нижний воздух поднимать вверх. И опускаем голову вниз. Джаланхара банку делаем. Либо опускаемся просто, наклоняемся просто вперед. Кому куда. Кто как привык. Вот. Но при этом, когда мы делаем задержку, надуваем полный живот, мы про себя, там, видимо, так боль наш, и произносим брам-брам-брам-брам-брам про себя. Окей? Поэтому делаем 3 подхода. 3. Кто сделал, ложимся отдыхать. Ну что, приходим сюда потихонечку и пишем отзывы.